Hello, everyone. I'm Evelyn Mitchell-Wolf, Senior Analyst here at Insider Intelligence. I hope you've all enjoyed today's session so far. It's been great to see so much engagement. And thanks for sticking around for our last session of the day, Ask the Analyst, the biggest trends for 2024, our live audience Q&A that is made possible by Roundel. I'm joined today by my wonderful colleagues, Susie David Canyon, our Vice President of Content, Jeremy Goldman, Senior Director of our Marketing, Retail, and Tech Briefings, and Yori Wormser, our Principal Analyst of Connectivity and Tech. Throughout the day, you've sat on panels about the outlook for Gen Z, retail media, generative AI, and more, and we'd love to answer your questions on those topics, as well as dig into any of your other burning curiosities. Ask us about what's on your mind for 2024. You can submit questions by using the chat window on the right of this video feed, and make sure you also let us know where you're tuning in from. So with that, let's get started. I'm going to kick things off with a few really great questions we received during our sessions earlier today. First up here, customers are so fickle. We all know this. So what should brands do to keep customers coming back?
So I think I'll take this one. At least I'll kick us off in that. I mean, I think we're always talking about the same things. It's really important to think about your customer as someone that you want them to keep coming back. So you need to offer either unique experiences or unique brands, like private label is a great way to have them coming back. And because we are, talking a lot about how the economy is a bit shaky, there are a lot of different mixed headlines around what to expect for 2024. So price and value and understanding what that means to your consumer is going to be even more important in 2024. I mean, I could keep going on and on. I think loyalty is such an important component of retail, but I would start with making sure that you have unique value proposition.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll take the perspective of technology. I think with technology, you really just want to enhance the experience. You don't employ the technology to employ the technology.
Right.
You actually think of the pain points and see what, how generative AI, for instance, can answer the questions customers are looking for, the specific pain points that they're addressing, and really build around that.
Limited time deals, I'll just say, great driver, especially as we're, talking about holiday season, very undervalued trigger to pull.
Flash sales. Rakuten. I mean, we could keep going. You guys are doing something around affiliate marketing. Also, another great way to drive people to your brand. I mean, there are a lot of levers, but at the end of the day, it's truly about having something unique, because otherwise people are going to price shop against other retailers, which means that you're not going to win necessarily on price if you don't have unique things.
Great. Well, I think that's a good checklist that you've all established for our audience. So we have a question here from the Gen Z panel with Jasmine. How does Gen Z spend their time with media? Jeremy, I think I'll throw this one your way.
Yeah, that was a fantastic, earth-shattering panel, earlier in the day, I'll just say. Honestly, one of the things that's really interesting about Gen Z is not necessarily that they're not consuming media. They're consuming quite a lot of it, but it's just different modes of media, that you're seeing. So for instance, time spent with TV is over 4 times less with traditional TV amongst Gen Z than baby boomers, just to see how quickly that has shifted, right? But then you see a lot of it has been moving towards social media. Of course, they're switching effortlessly, and they're also spending time with multiple media channels, with a second screen than compared to other generations. So that's another really interesting deviation from past generations that we cover.
Absolutely. And that multi-screening point is really interesting, right? It creates a lot of opportunities to reach that particular audience in new and different ways, new touch points that might be able to amplify more kind of mass targeted media, like something, if there was a TV campaign that was targeted specifically to maybe a particular TV show that is known to be popular amongst Gen Z, to also supplement that kind of campaign with something more digitally focused, perhaps TikTok. I had to say it because we all were thinking it. Okay, next one here, we're going to talk about retail media. It's another kind of, if you're playing bingo here, It's another term that you're probably looking for. Do we think retail media is a tactical or a strategic initiative for 2024?
I think that's a great question. We were talking about this before. It's around, we have to separate the retailers from the brands and how they think about the retail media network as an advertising vehicle or as a platform to engage with the brands that they already carry. So on the retailer side, it's both, right? It's a strategy in that it's another revenue stream. And it's a way to engage with the brands that you already carry on your platform to continue to be with you in different ways throughout the shopping journey. And it's also tactical in that you have to understand where to place the ad at the right spot, at the right time, using AI maybe or other sort of data algorithms to better understand where to place the ad for maximum value without, and this we talk a lot about, without cluttering the page for the consumer, right?
Yeah, I agree with all that. I would just add that there's also a matter of, if you're a brand, where are you within your adoption journey for retail media, right? Is this something that you've been buying ads for a few years, or is this something that's very new to you that you're just kind of figuring out? The CPMs are incredibly different, so you have to understand essentially what that's going to do to your margin. So it's if you're very early on, you're just laying that kind of foundational work, and if you're kind of optimizing and you're further along, then it's going to be a strategic move.
For a lot of mobile sites or mobile apps as well, it can be a strategic decision. Something like Instacart or Uber or Lyft, they can employ a type of media as well, an advertising platform. And for them, it's very much strategic. And then, of course, you have the tactile aspects as well.
Yeah. But I think what's new for 2024, at least the way we're thinking about it, and everybody's gearing up for their 24 trend reports, it's this idea that every retailer under the sun thinks they need to be in retail media and to figure out how to put that up. And so that means that brands have to really think about brands don't have a limitless budget, right? So they have to think about where do they need to be. And so we're wondering if 24 is going to bring a little bit of consolidation, and maybe not everybody should have a retail media network.
Well, speaking of 2024 and everyone's putting together their 2024 trends reports, we have another live question here. What trend or trends for 2024 surprises you the most as we're thinking about putting these reports together?
Oh, should we do that in each of our areas?
I think that's probably a good way to go about it.
Are we?
I mean, we're writing about it, so it's not really surprising us because we're looking forward. And I mean, I think the one that the trend I'm most, I think, confident on is that search is going to be really transformed in 2024. A lot of people thought, when Bing introduced generative AI back in February or March, that might rather shake up the whole search industry. That didn't really happen yet, but I think in 2024 it will. You'll see a lot more, the multimodal, these large language models that can ingest and produce images and voice and music and all different types of media. I think that's going to supercharge visual search. The actual conversational interfaces will go from beta, like the search generative experience on Google, to the main site. And you're going to see search fragment when social media chatbots start taking a lot of search, and more retailers will have more search. So I think there's going to be a really fundamental shift in search in 2024.
Mine kind of relates to that a little bit, and this is something that I can't take credit for, but Zia, who you saw earlier today, has been talking a bit about there's a kind of like a zero-sum game that's going on, where all of these major tech players, they're all trying to get you to spend a little bit more time on their platform. But that incremental bit of time spent, it's really difficult to achieve, especially because now you have shopping on multiple platforms, you've got media, you've got this major convergence, and it's very difficult to figure out essentially if you're a brand where you're going to get that incremental lift. So as a result, everybody is turning to AI. They're turning to essentially whatever they haven't turned to in the past in order to get that additional time spent. And it's going to be a little bit difficult, but it's going to be fun to watch for us. So.
Well, and what I would add to that is like time spent is how long are you on an item or whatever media platform, whatever it is, but it's also how attentive are you, right? So when you are all talking about the two screens as a retailer or brand, you have to be really conscientious of that, right? And you have to have memorable ads and maybe interactive ads so that someone is actually paying attention to yours versus watching TV but on their phone. So I think that's really important to make the distinction maybe a little bit around captive time spent versus just scrolling through mindlessly. For retail, we have a couple. I think up until earlier today, I would have said that for me, the big one that I've been trying to push a lot, but I think this is it for 24 is live streaming and how live stream shopping is going to become a little bit of a bit. I know Yuri's laughing because I talk about this all the time. I am a big believer in this, but I think because of TikTok, now I said it too, and TikTok shop, we're going to probably see that blow up in the US a lot faster than we had anticipated. This morning, or maybe yesterday, there was news about Amazon pulling their 2 apparel stores. So one of our trends that we're looking at is also how is the role of the store changing? It's not something new. We've been talking about it a lot, but it's this idea around unified commerce. And it's no longer about bridging the gap between online and in-store, but it's really understanding the value of your store footprint and figuring out what do you need to have available there, including merchandise, including experiences, including buy online, pick up in store, and so many other things. So lots to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and with live streaming, I think generative AI is also going to have an impact because it can interpret stuff in real time.
Oh, yeah.
And that it might introduce new types of advertising formats, new ways of having contextual advertising in real time.
A lot to look forward to. 2024 seems to be a year, I mean, of absolutely unprecedented change. And I agree, just to kind of circle back, Yuri, to what you were saying about search. I'm working on our next search report right now, and it is just the amount of change that we're seeing right now, especially in something like search that has been kind of just steady as she goes for decades at this point. This is going to be such a pivotal year. So let's talk a little bit more about Gen AI, shall we? I mean, we all know everybody has questions on this. We got a couple of really good ones during Paul's panel. How do you ensure correctness of so many variants of ad copies from Gen AI? Do you deploy Gen AI to gut check because human checkers would defeat the purpose? And Yuri, I know you have an opinion on this, so lay it on us.
Yeah, I mean, I think human oversight at this point is still critical. I mean, there are too many hallucinations. I think you can get around a lot of the rogue uses, even within advertising, by really good prompting. Really having very clear directions. Who your audience is, what are the guidelines, what exactly the type of language you want to use. But to make sure that everything is going okay, you're still going to need a human oversight, at least right now. So I definitely think it does not take the human out of it at all. It just makes the human oversight, the human have the ability to have a much bigger impact.
Yeah, because I think that this is something that a lot of people are familiar with, trying to create 75 different human creatives using a human can actually introduce errors, So instead, actually, if you have a well-trained, well-prompted AI, and then if you use the human, strategically in order to oversee it, you're going to have ultimately more options. You're going to be able to have better personalization, and it's just essentially a win-win. So keep the human in the loop.
I kind of think of it also as like art and science. Like I definitely think about that retail, merchandising, so many components, but even advertising, right? You need the science around personalization and better understanding who is your audience, but then you also need that little flair of art sort of to make sure that it makes sense and the translation made sense and there are no hallucinations or any of these other sort of ... things that you didn't think about that don't make sense.
Absolutely. Maybe we just need to kind of redefine what the purpose of Gen AI is in the way that question was asked. How concerned are you about the ability of Gen AI to mass generate garbage content and clog up all automated channels? It's a big question.
This is something that I think we've actually looked at, and some of it is almost like theoretical at this point, but just to explain to people at home or in the office. I mean, basically the idea that you're going to have all of these different things that are going to be feeding into one another, and Gen AI doesn't realize that it's being trained on junk content that was generated over the last year. I mean, the truth is that as this becomes a problem, I think that I'm cautiously optimistic that the major players realize it's an issue, realize that their models are going to essentially collapse. They don't want that. They've got a strong financial motive in order to stop that from happening. So I'm pretty confident that it does get worked out. But in the short term, I think it is one of those key things is you have to be careful what you're feeding, Gen AI, in the same way that you are careful about like what product photography you put on your e-com site. It's essentially garbage in, garbage out, and buyer beware. You have to be very careful.
Yeah. Yeah, and I 100% agree with that. But I think the inverse is also true, that a lot of legitimate sites and sites that get traffic through search are also going to be endangered, because search is going to synthesize a lot of answers. So how is that going to affect the publisher ecosystem is an open question.
Awesome. Okay, let's go back to some 2024 trends. We have some live questions coming in about those, and keep them coming, audience, please. We love to see this engagement. So hit us with your hardest questions. All right. Are there any in-store trends that we see for 2024 that will enhance the shopper experience, or really any in-store trends I think would be interesting in this context?
I mean, it's interesting because Blake on my team has been doing path to purchase research, and store is still really important for every component of the shopper journey, including where the transaction happens, right? In our forecast, we know that it's like 20% of sales will be online in another 3-4 years. So that's 80% of sales are in a store. And when we were talking about loyalty earlier, right, it's important to make sure you have the right experience in your store so that you have customers that keep coming back. And so it's hard to answer that question, because I think it also just depends on who your brand, what your brand is, what you stand for, right? So there are some retailers that are starting to do these more no noise, no music, no tactile sort of environments for an hour, or like they're doing, the run up to this example was not great, but like senior, like during COVID, if you think about it, they had senior hours where people that had, were more apt to get COVID potentially, and not as strong immune systems when shopping at a different day. So not necessarily what we think of experience, but also really an important experience as a consumer, right? But we are seeing more pop-up shops. We're seeing more partnerships happening. We're seeing more shop-in shops. So a little bit different, right? The Marks and Spencer or Barnes and Nobles is selling through Macy's. Marks and Spencer is working with Target. Target just announced a group of brands that it's working with. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in those partnerships. But as far as experiences go, it's not new. It's just how do you elevate that?
This is not really an answer, but a question for you. Do you think you'll see more immersive media pop up in stores?
So I definitely think we will see some more like AR, VR you're talking about. Yeah, absolutely. And we're Sky is launching a study on beauty, and that's one of the questions as well, right? How do you use AR, VR to enhance the customer experience while you're in the store? Because we talk a lot about it while you're at home. You click and you see the furniture, or you see the lipstick on your face, but you're in your house. So what will that look like in store? And we've seen Amazon has tried in London, actually, the hair salon, where you get to see the dye on your hair before it actually becomes in your hair. So I think with everything that a retailer does, it needs to either solve a friction point or make something more convenient. And then you just have to understand what convenience means for your customer. Is it speed it up, offer me more things so I don't have to go to different places? Is it give me the right price? Is it give me good quality? So you really need to do a lot of consumer research to just better understand who your customer is. But yes, that was a very long answer to yes. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I'm really pretty bullish on AR and VR and immersive in specific contexts, and I think in store is a really great context for it. So yeah, I agree with you.
And even though nobody cares, no, I will tell you, I just say very quickly, in-store retail media, I think whether or not, people could debate whether or not that enhances the overall experience. I think if it's done well, it certainly can. And we're expecting more and more retail media growth to happen from, in-store retail media. So I think that'll be an interesting part to watch.
Well, and it's interesting because there have been some deals that didn't quite work out. They were in pilot mode and it didn't work out. So there's that. But there's also not exactly retail media, but there have been a lot of I mean, it's been 10 years. We've been talking about the magic mirrors in a Soho store where you like click on the thing. Lots of different retailers have tried different sort of AI technology driven experiences. Some of them add friction. Like there's a store I love that had like this jean finder, but then they didn't have the inventory behind the jean that the jean finder was telling you were the right jeans for you. So I think you have to just make sure that if you're using technology and immersive technology in the store, that it makes sense and that you have all of the different components together, like inventory. Another source of frustration for many when it comes to these things, I can apparently talk about this for a long time, is Wi-Fi, right? If you don't have Wi-Fi in a store, then don't offer me some sort of activity that needs my phone. I will stop.
No, it's all great stuff, and it is critical to proactively mitigate those frustrations where you can, if you're going to try and introduce that kind of immersive technology into your store, because you don't want to introduce additional frustrations by trying to shake things up. Okay, so let's keep talking about retail, but maybe transition from in-store back to digital. Do you predict retailers will invest more in their offsite digital strategies to increase scale in 2024? And with that, if brands will push retailers for a better offsite experience?
I think one thing I could definitely say to this is that so if you look at social commerce, according to our forecast, that is going to be growing. That's basically offsite, that is going to be growing at twice the growth rate, granted off of a much smaller base than overall e-commerce sales. So yeah, if you want to basically expand your scope as a retailer, if you're selling online, you've got to be thinking about like where the customer is and meet them where they are. And that's often going to mean to have a bifurcated strategy where you're trying to reach different people in different places. I think social commerce is one spot, but it's certainly that's not the only spot. There are a number of different other ones that I don't know if you guys want to talk about.
Well, I mean, so I'm assuming your question was more in line about retail media and how are retailers thinking about their space as a retail media network provider. So basically it's an advertising platform, right? And originally it started within their own space, and how are they going off-site to other areas that are not necessarily their domain specifically? So there's that to what we just talked about, and we continuously talk about this. But when you think about, if I didn't think about it from a retail media lens, but just thought about it as a retailer is a brand, right? So they also need to advertise. Like you're choosing which department store you're going to buy the Levi's that are available in multiple department stores, right? And so I think they also have to advertise their own brands including their retail operation on all types of platforms, including social, including some of the apps that Yuri was talking about, like Instacart and Uber and DoorDash. Like you have to be everywhere. You have to be everywhere all the time so that the customer finds you exactly when they're looking for you.
Yeah, and I think an additional platform retailers are going to have to worry about are just these, not to bring in AI again, but AI, things like Meta AI or ChatGPT and plugins for ChatGPT and or even agents in some of these. How are customers going to get to your product page from these newer platforms? And I think people aren't really thinking about that much yet, but I think 2024 they will.
Yeah. And I mean, they're everywhere, retailers, right? Retailers / brands. They're on Klarnas of the world. I mean, like they're really everywhere you look, all the traditional methods of advertising and all these new platforms. So again, I can't say it enough. If you don't know who your customer is, then you don't know where you're supposed to be advertising. So it all really starts with just better understanding who your customer is.
Great. Well, I think, let's see how long we can go on this one. This might be our last question, depending on time, but it's a really juicy one. So thank you to whoever asked this. Please talk about privacy, and not in the sense of why it's important. We're all getting hammered with that all the time, but how will privacy initiatives affect brands, and what are some critical risk factors that brands should be looking out for? Here, I'll start us off because privacy is one of my coverage areas, and I'm very passionate about this. And I think a really I always say this is the best place to start, is to do a really comprehensive audit of your data assets, first-party data assets, both inflow and outflow. Where is it coming from? Where is it going? Across all of your departments in your organization. And it is a critical first step, because you have to know what you're dealing with in order to ensure that you are compliant and institute all the appropriate data governance infrastructures that you're going to need to stay compliant with. New regulation and legislation is popping up all over the place, especially if you're in the US. I'm actually over here in the EU right now, and the GDPR has been going strong for over 5 years now. So the way privacy is changing our landscape, it's not done yet. We still have things to look out for. It seems like whoever asks this question is well aware of that. But I think having a really comprehensive understanding of your own internal data assets is absolutely critical. And you cannot have any blind spots here. You cannot have gaps in your knowledge. That is where the risk lies.
Yeah, I really agree with that. And sort of jumping or following your comment about knowing your data, your whole data store, is really understanding your first party data and understanding how you can gather more of that in a way that is purely opt-in. What type of experiences can you give consumers where they willingly give their data to you, trust that data with you, and then engage in a way that gives you really rich data. I've seen brands like some quick service restaurants creating these apps that are really just apps around experiences, rather than trying to make money, trying to create commerce or anything like that. They're trying to get data, but they're trying to get data by providing real value to the consumer. And I think that's the key, sort of figuring out how you can get real value, give the consumer real value, so they're willing to give you first party data.
Yeah. I was going to throw in the idea of needing a really strong loyalty program that's either attached to your store credit card and to cash, right? So you need to think about, there are lots of people who still pay in cash. And so understanding that group and building out a loyalty program where you're giving them an experience where they're willing to give you back data. Because we also don't think about that transactional data is really important, right? People who buy this mascara also buy this lipstick. So then I'm going to target people who already bought this mascara with that lipstick because others are, so like we don't necessarily think about transactional data as important, but it's critical in understanding.
And a lot of it is also about, and we've seen the data that suggests this, that customers, if there's a value exchange going on that they feel is fair, then they will give you data, and it's just a matter of actually being able to build that relationship over time, and then to do something with that data, rather than we've seen studies about people asking for data and then saying we'll figure out later what we're going to do with it. That's not the way to win trust. And obviously, if you have no idea what you're going to do with it, you're not able to target and personalize offers and engage with them the way that you ought to.
Yeah, and that's a really good point too, right? Because there were so many of those like original subscription boxes that had you fill out these giant surveys, and then you didn't even get matching things in your box. So like that's definitely a way to turn people off, right? So if you're asking for people to take the time to fill out surveys and give you data that's qualitative, then you have to match it with you have to be responsible users, but you also have to match back, right? So that they feel heard.
Absolutely. And to your point, Jeremy, about knowing what you're going to do with that data, that is a critical component of informed consent, right? And consumers cannot consent to giving their data freely if they don't know how it's going to be used. And that's a really kind of can of worms point in our digital ecosystem these days, that consumers, I've seen some research from Pew recently that suggests consumers feel like they don't have any control over their data because they don't know how it's being used. So anyways, we could probably talk about that for a really, really long time. But unfortunately, we're out of time. And this was really excellent. Thank you all. That's a wrap on our last summit of the year. Thanks again to Susie, Jeremy, and Yori for joining me for this session. Our production crew behind the scenes also deserves a huge thank you for all of their hard work. They pulled off today with absolute grace and poise, as they always do. And also thanks to you, our audience. I want to remind you all that all of today's sessions are available already on demand, so you can watch them again or share them with your colleagues as you please. You'll be hearing from us very soon about our next summit, which will take place on Friday, May 3rd, 2024. Thank you again for joining us today, and have a great weekend.